The Phantom Archives of Edgar the Architect, and Schale by Gen Kagami. Volume 4, Poissy. The Soirée of the White Machine, Villa Savoye. Untethered from the concept of time, the genius architect Edgar and the pearl-haired youth Schale wander through eternity, retaining their youthful, exquisite forms. Across eras, they traverse the world's renowned architectural works and the maddening constructs Edgar himself once assembled. This is a tranquil, decadent journey through phantom architecture, dissecting space, light, gravity, and the anomalies lurking within through cold, unflinching logic. 1. The Invitation from Monsieur Savoye. The black-painted taxi they had hailed on a Paris street corner was in a condition so hauntingly flawless it felt spectral. Carrying Edgar and Schale, the vehicle cut through the dry wind, gliding briskly along the road leading toward the meadows of Poissy. The driver, clad in a crisp, fashionable uniform of the era, stole curious glances through the rearview mirror at the enigmatic pair. "Edgar, look! They really are having a party!" Schale stepped out of the taxi dressed in +4s, the height of 1930s avant-garde fashion. Yet, chosen by Edgar's obsessive aesthetic eye, the ensemble was crafted not from sporty tweed, but from a midnight blue velvet that seemed to swallow the light, devoid of even a shred of rustic outdoor charm. More abnormal still was the treatment of his lower limbs. Beneath the voluminous hems elegantly fastened below the knee where thick wool hose should have been, Schale wore silk stockings of such extreme thinness they appeared like translucent mother-of-pearl, an utterly decadent choice. The contrast between the heavy masculine leather shoes and the perverse, fragile shimmer of silk against his calves cruelly highlighted his existence as a beautiful bug within this rational space. Edgar, meanwhile, utterly rejected the pastoral scenery and resort trends. He wore a charcoal grey three-piece suit, cut with the lethal precision of a razor, excluding all play or leisure. It was less a garment of cloth and more a steel framework assembled through rigorous structural calculation, with a necktie of ice-like silk fastened without a millimeter's error. His constructive silhouette radiated an intimidation so profound. He seemed to be a piece of chilled absolute architecture himself, standing sharp against the soft Poissy breeze. In the centre of the meadow, a pure white box rose from the earth upon pilotis, the Villa Savoye. At its base, the latest luxury automobiles of the day were lined with mathematical order and elegantly dressed. Ladies and gentlemen were being drawn into the entrance as if by a vacuum. "Humph, Le Corbusier, I see you still insist on defining human movement by the arc." Edgar handed a generous tip to the driver and, adjusting the lapel of his perfect suit, quietly spat his poison toward the white machine, guiding humans into the residence by the turning radius of a motorcar, a design as rational as it is restrictive. Stepping inside through the glass-walled entrance, they were enveloped in an inorganic silence as cold as a hospital. In the hall immediately adjacent sat a lone white wash basin, exposed and starkly out of place for a residence. A device for isolating and purifying man from contagion. How thorough! Edgar gave a derisive snort, and an elderly butler in a tailcoat bowed deeply, his voice unreadable. "Welcome to Villa Savoye. Madame and the guests await you in the salon on the primary floor." Having ascended the ramp, prompted by the butler, the two began to climb the concrete ramp that stretched gently through the centre of the space. Along its edge crawled a handrail of black steel piping, reminiscent of a factory gangplank or a steamship deck tracing a cold, uncompromising line. This incline, leading from the dim first floor to the light-drenched second, was calculated to keep even the walker's heartbeat at a constant rhythm. This is what he calls the architectural promenade. By eliminating the vertical jerk of stairs, he delivers the inhabitant to the upper floor without allowing them to break their stride. Look at this steel rail. It is a factory ramp, or perhaps the guide rail of a conveyor belt. Schale, we are being funneled through this tube not as humans, but as components, circulating through the innards of this machine. As Edgar finished his chilling commentary, the ramp ended and the view opened dramatically. Sunlight flooded in through horizontally continuous windows. The brisk pulse of jazz drifted from a gramophone. The chime of clinking champagne glasses and the dense aroma of rich cuisine struck their senses all at once. Oh, what a delicious smell! Edgar, look, there's foie gras terrine over there. 2. The conveyor belt, known as circulation. The primary salon, bathed in light, was dominated by the rhythmic ticking of the jazz from the gramophone and the chatter of the dressed-up throng. A maid in a sterile white uniform offered a silver tray with an expressionless face. Edgar plucked a champagne glass with glacial fingertips, but Schale paid her no mind, dashing instead toward the long buffet table, laden with opulent dishes. Edgar moved alone toward the far end of the vast living area, toward the outdoor terrace of the second level that sprawled beyond massive sliding glass doors. His cold grey eyes pierced the outdoor ramp that ascended further to the third-floor solarium. Persistent, isn't he? Even when moving from indoors to out, the ramp, the circulation, never ends, framing the landscape with horizontal windows, and finally pushing the human toward the roof. To Corbusier, the inhabitant is nothing more than blood, forced to circulate incessantly through the body of this machine. Edgar, look, this terrine is so rich. As if to cut through Edgar's murmurs, Schale returned with a gold-rimmed plate piled high with foie gras. That innocent, violently raw appetite and emotion of sorts scattered the scent of beast and fat through the perfectly calculated sterile space. It was then that the hostess, Madame Émilie Savoye, approached the two conspicuous outsiders, her pearls clicking with a hard, mechanical sound against her neck. "Welcome, my dear guests. Is this house not marvellous?" Though I must confess the kitchen was flooded by yesterday's rain. When I complain to Le Corbusier, he merely offers logic. Machines require maintenance, as if he fancies himself a mere mechanic. The moment the Madame vented her grievance with a doll-like smile, clack! From deep within the residence a heavy, unpleasant driving sound echoed, as if a massive brass mainspring were being forcibly wound. "It is coming, Schale. The output of the machine has increased." Edgar sipped his champagne just enough to dampen his lips, speaking with ice-cold calm. Immediately, the atmosphere within the villa shifted. Life drained from Madame Savoye's face as she spoke, and her head snapped into an unnaturally fixed angle. "It is flooded, it is flooded." She began to repeat the words, stripped of all emotion, following the precise tick of a metronome. The other guests followed suit. The gentlemen brought their glasses to their lips at the exact same speed, like synchronized crank mechanisms. The ladies began to move with a fixed stride, as if placed upon an invisible conveyor belt, treading toward the outdoor ramp Edgar had been watching, ascending mechanically. They were no longer human. They had become parts of an automata, integrated into the Villa Savoye, the machine 4, living, functioning solely to maintain the flow of the bloodline. 3. The programmed promenade. Wait, what's wrong with everyone? Madame, pull yourself together. Schale reached out to grab the Madame's arm, but her slender frame, as if driven by the torque of rigid brass gears, deflected his soft fingertips with an inorganic, overwhelming force. Not a single guest spoke now. With hollow eyes they ascended the outdoor ramp. It was nothing less than a cold evacuation procedure, following the perfect promenade intended by the architect to force the circulation of stagnant blood. It is futile, Schale. They are now components of this architecture. Edgar leaned against a concrete wall, apart from the eerie procession of automata, observing the mad spectacle with his grey eyes. Corbusier sought to calculate life, to utterly exclude irrational human emotions or whims, reducing even the movement of the inhabitants to a perfect equation. This is the ultimate conclusion of that purposefulness. Truly, it is so beautiful it makes me nauseous. At the wall of the roof garden, the solarium where the ramp ended, the automata stopped one by one before the long horizontal openings. Every single one of them tilted their heads at the exact same perfect angle to view the scenery outside, repeating the pose. It was not a breath of fresh air from the world outside, but a ritual of ideological incarceration, forcing them to appreciate only the correct view designated by the architect. 4. Escape to the ordinary. This isn't a party anymore. I just want to finish my foie gras. In a fit of pique, Schale forcibly snatched the plate of terrine from the hand of a servant who was continuing its mechanical motions. In that instant, as if a gear had been stripped, the rhythm of the villa began to crumble and grind. The gramophone needle jumped, and the automata collapsed on the spot like puppets whose strings had been cut. Good grief. It seems your appetite has caused a bug in the monument of modern architecture. Edgar sighed, grabbing Schale by the collar and leading him outside. Beneath the pilotis, the same taxi as before was parked silently, as if it were only natural to wait for its fare. Back inside the car, the scent of leather seats and the comforting vibration of the engine enveloped them. Seeing Schale stuffing his face with the stolen terrine, Edgar gave a small, rare smile. Well, no matter. Having an unpredictable human like you by my side is far less tedious than those dolls who can only move according to calculation. Was that a compliment or an insult? Who can say? How is the foie gras, Schale? Edgar gazed out the window at the meadows of Poissy in the gathering dusk of 1931. The taxi simply continued to drive through the unending time in which they alone remained. End of Volume 4.